Okay.
Yes,
This
ma'am.
is the case for this is the case for Johnny Johnson, DOC number 467-539. Date of birth, June 24th, 1957. Classified as a first felony offender. Offense, manslaughter. Sentencing date, March 12, 2003. Sentenced to a total of 40 years. Parole date, September 29th, 2021. Good time, October 6, 2034. Full term, October 1st, 2041. Is this information correct, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Mr. Roche.
Thank you, Ms. Teresa. Good morning, Warden Goodwin.
Good morning, Mr. Roche. You look very nice today. I like that tie. Very, very professional.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Johnson.
Good morning.
How are you doing today?
Good.
Good. Mr. Johnson, my name is Alvin Roche, and I've been assigned your case. And we're going to do a mix between a conversation between you and myself, and then I'm going to put some information into the record, okay?
Yes, sir.
Just relax. It's just a conversation.
Yes, sir.
Mrs. Johnson, you're currently 64 years old, and you've been in protective custody at David Wade since 2003. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you're a first felony offender. I think maybe this was your first and only arrest, and you became eligible because of Act 122 of the Louisiana State Legislature of 2021. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you have been incarcerated just a tiny bit over 20 years of a 40-year sentence. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So basically, you've served about 50% of your sentence.
Yes, sir.
I see where you've earned 387 days of good time,
Yes, sir.
which moved your good time date up to 2034. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And just to go over some of the programs, 1 second. I see where you've taken a comprehensive substance abuse program.
Yes, sir.
So let's stop there and let's talk about drugs. How long were you a police officer?
16 and a half years.
16 and a half years. So you were 44 at the time, so you became a police officer in your mid-20s.
Yes, sir.
Any issues with drugs or alcohol during your lifespan?
No, sir.
Never any illegal drugs?
No, sir. I have to correct that. When I was going to college, I did try marijuana a couple of times, but it didn't do anything for me. So that was my
So the
experience.
answer to my question was yes.
Yes, sir.
Because I said, have you had issues with drugs any time in your lifespan?
Yes,
So
sir.
you did have a marijuana problem. When did you start using marijuana?
When I was in college, like I said, I tried it 2 or 3 times, and that was it. I never known any more after that.
You never graduated to anything other than marijuana.
No, sir.
Was there a difficulty with alcohol?
No, sir.
So you just took the comprehensive drug substance abuse program to accumulate good time?
at the time that I took it, we didn't receive any kind of good time. I took it just to really broaden my horizons and learn all that I could.
Good, good. The next program is stress management. And I can understand why you needed to take that. What did you get from stress management?
Stress management really showed me that I should really take I count to 10, and it's just like anger management. Really decide in your mind if getting upset is really the proper thing to do. Is it really that important to me? And what could be the consequences to me or my family as far as employment or anything else, because I couldn't keep my cool. Was it really worth getting in trouble over?
Okay, and this next program, nonviolent conflict resolution, and you really needed that at the time you were in difficult area with losing your job and your fiance breaking off the marriage. So what did this conflict resolution teach you?
It taught me that the best thing to do is just remove yourself from whatever the issue is you're going through at that time, that there's other ways to settle it other than a confrontation.
And if you did just that 20 years ago, these two young men, Taylor and Gene, would have their mother right now.
That's correct.
The next one is advanced stress management, advanced nonviolent conflict resolution, living in balance, and celebrate recovery. So there's 3 substance abuse programs that this morning you're telling me you had no other reason to take this than to brighten your horizon and expand your knowledge about people who do use drugs.
Yes, sir.
Victim awareness, what did you get from victim awareness?
From victim awareness, I learned that there is, of course, the victim, their family, and the trials that you put them through, and all the hurt and the pain. And also my family, my children, my parents, everybody is affected through this. As far as the community that you live, they become victims too, because property values, just nervousness from some kind of crime in their area. And I learned that it's just not, there's other ways to work things out. And through stress management, it showed me how to, and anger management showed me how to really think about other avenues, and mainly to remove yourself from that situation the best way you can to avoid any kind of conflict.
And as a veteran law enforcement officer, you should have known that 20 years ago.
Yes, sir.
And then there's another course, alternate to violence, and that's pretty much on the same subject, in advanced anger management. So in a brief sentence, what did you get from all of those? And basically everything here is substance abuse or either anger management. What did you get from the anger management programs that you took?
Biggest thing is to slow down, count to 10. There's breathing exercises, exercises where you can tighten your face muscles. You can do other things to get rid of all this stress or anger.
And remove yourself from the situation.
Yes, sir.
Talked about programs. Now, tell me about your disciplinary. I see you had a disciplinary maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and I'm concerned because it dealt with threatening to do a violation or threatening someone. Tell me about that.
I believe the violation you're talking about, we had a person that was living on our tier, and he was having some very serious mental health issues. And the guys on my tier, we all discussed, we had to get him some help some way or another. And so at the time, they wrote a letter, and I signed my name to it too, because we were trying to get him some mental health. I mean, this guy was really acting up in a bad way. And I didn't realize when I signed my name to that sheet that it could be construed as anything else. But I found out later on that that was not the proper channel. If we would have filed complaints individually, it would have been a different situation. But since we didn't, then it was like we were trying to kind of overpower them in the administration here in some type of way. But that was not my intention.
It was understood as a threat to do something or something would happen.
Yes, sir. I simply signed my name on to the deal with the rest of the guys.
Okay. Now, Mrs. Johnson, you've been waiting for this day. You thought it wouldn't come this soon, but Act 21 has made it possible. And I'm going to let you know that today is not just about Johnnie Johnson.
Yes,
Today is about Gene Murphy. Today is about Taylor Harrington. Today is about the law enforcement agencies in your jurisdiction. Every agency except the judge has submitted very strong letters or statements totally opposing your early release. The DA's office has said that it was a malicious, it was a premeditated, it was a horrendous crime. A crime that didn't have to happen. And you are a law enforcement officer, and the community holds the law enforcement officer in a higher standard. He is supposed to prevent and help the communities stay safe, and you didn't do it. You didn't do that 20 years ago. And the community and everyone concerned today, your family, the victim's family, held you to a high standard, and you didn't meet that standard. So it's not just about Johnnie Johnson. It's about your family, the victim's family, and the community in which you're going to live. And you do understand that.
Yes, sir.
Now, my information has conflicting versions of what happened. All I know is that after you committed the crime, you called Sheriff Prater and confessed. Is that true?
No, sir.
You didn't call Sheriff Prater?
No, sir.
Okay. There wasn't a conversation with Sheriff Prater on the way to your parents' home?
No, sir.
Okay, okay. So tell me exactly what happened,
Talking about the crime itself.
the crime itself.
Okay.
Okay, my understanding is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, because some of my facts may be wrong. You are asked to get some medical assistance with your stress and anger problems. You went through a couple of counseling sessions, and then you met with a disciplinary board. At which time Sheriff Prater recommended your termination. And the week or so after that, Ms. Harrington broke off your engagement and you went over to the house. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So tell me what happened.
The morning that this took place, she had called me and her sons had some fishing equipment that was in my boat. And so I told her I would bring it to her the next time I was up that way. Well, I had purchased a rather large storage building.
So tell me what happened.
Okay. When I got to the house that morning, we had a long conversation. She came outside the house. I backed up in the driveway because I was going to load some equipment there, that some plywood, and I was going to disconnect a utility building that I had sold to a friend that they were going to come get the next week. She came out. We talked for probably an hour, something like that, hour and a half maybe. And she was telling me that she wanted me to continue to pay her some of the bills in the house. She wanted me to continue to pay her for her car or her breast implants. And I told her I wasn't going to do it. I mean, I was having nothing to do with her whatsoever. A little while later, her second ex-husband showed up to pick up his son, Taylor. Well, I exited my truck and I walked back to my shop.
Sir, I don't need a preview. I need to know exactly what happened.
Okay. I'm back there. She walks in there and her whole demeanor had changed. She said, "Don't you still love me? Don't you still need me?" And I said, "Yes, I do." Well, we had consensual sex inside my building. And then as soon as we got through, she walked up the side of the house and walked in the front door and started calling for her son, Gene, and said, Gene, get your gun, call 911. Well, and I asked her, I said, "Why are you doing this?" She said, "You just raped me. Who do you think they're going to believe, me or you?" I said, "I didn't rape you." Well, when she told me that, it just completely, I lost it. I mean, that's the only way to put it. I mean, all my experience and everything else, I did not see that coming. I didn't expect it. It shocked me. And I didn't know what to do. Well, I knew Gene had a pistol because I bought it for him. So he went to go get it. And I didn't know if he was coming with the gun or anything else. And I told her, I said, "Come on outside, let's talk. We got to talk." And she just keeps screaming, "Gene, Gene, Gene." So we walk out the door. And up to this point, I was not armed or anything else, but I always kept a pistol inside the console of my truck. And I thought I heard the door open. And when she had said, "Gene, get your gun," I figured he had the gun. I didn't know he couldn't get the gun cabinet open. Well, I just completely lost it. And I pulled the gun out and I shot her twice.
So you didn't drag her out the house?
Yes, sir. I drug her out of the house to come outside and talk.
So, but you just told me y'all went outside.
Oh, well, yes, sir, I took her outside to get her to come outside and talk.
And of course, your father has a different version. So, okay, so there's many different versions of what happened. Okay. So, and then you left the scene and went to your parents' house.
Yes, sir.
And that's where you were arrested in the driveway.
Yes, sir.
I'm gonna just let you know that your father says that you went get some of your belongings from a storage area in the back of the house. And but you said that you was bringing some fishing equipment for her sons out of your boat. So let's continue. You have opposition from both sons, Gene Murphy and Taylor Harrington. So tell me what your transition plan is. What are you planning to work and what do you plan to live?
Okay. What I plan on doing is, since I've been here, I have taken up leather work, and I plan on doing that, and possibly a little bit later on, after I get established, to go and get a CDL and start possibly driving a truck.
So you're going to start a new career almost at the age of 65.
Yes, sir.
Tell me what your job at the facility is.
I am orderly. I work in keep the hobby shop room where we do the leather work. I keep it clean and also help out in any other way that I'm asked.
Okay. And where are you going to live?
My intentions are of living with my friend Melanie Townsend, and also helping to take care of her mother, which is bedridden at this time, and helping with that situation, because she is the only child, and I've known them for years and years. We went to school together, and I've had a real close relationship to her mom and dad for many, many years. They were best friends of my parents.
Your master record says that you have 2 children. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Where are your 2 children today?
My daughter lives in Shreveport and my son lives in Stonewall.
Okay. How is your relationship with your 2 children?
My relationship with my daughter is really well. I mean, we get along really, really well, and I talk to her really, really often. She comes to visit. My son, when he was going to college, I used to see him every other weekend because he went to Tech, which is right up the road from here.
Right.
And I met his girlfriends and everything else. Well, his situation changed, and he started seeing another woman. And at that time, the girl that he ended up marrying, her uncle was serving time in Angola, and she pretty much.
Sir, do you have a relationship with your son?
No, sir.
Now, Warden Goodwin, would you like to make any comments, remarks, or observations?
Mr. Roche, Lieutenant Johnson's been Dave Wade since 2003. He's been in our protective custody unit the entire time. He has maintained a good conduct history. He's had those 2 write-ups over almost 19 years at this institution, and he You know, he's not a problem for the staff. He's usually very cooperative, and he's taken those programs that are listed on the submittal, the substance abuse and stress management and other programming. All of that is accurate, and he has taken those programs. And that's about all I can say, Mr. Roche. I know his record to speak for itself. The nature of the crime and his prison record and things he's done to prepare for reentry all speak for itself.
Thank you, Warden Goodwin. And Mr. Johnson, I just looked at some updated information that I didn't see before, and it says community attitude. Sentencing Judge Joan Mosley opposes your early release. DA's office, James Stewart Sr., Caddo Parish, opposes your release. Lieutenant David Robinson of the Caddo Parish Sheriff's Office is opposed to your release. Chief of Police of Shreveport, Louisiana is opposed to your release. So you have strong opposition from the legal community and quite adamant opposition from the victim's family. I just need you to understand that this is not just about Johnnie Johnson. Mr. Johnson, I understand that you applied for clemency also. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Were you granted a hearing?
Yes, sir.
Did you have that hearing?
Oh, sir.
You opted out because of Act 122. Is that correct?
I didn't opt out. I just, when they, I got a new rap sheet and it said when I was eligible for parole, I didn't opt out. I just thought that since the pandemic and all that, it just never came up for my hearing.
Okay. I think you were automatically opted out because you had a current parole date.
Okay.
And I will be quite frank with you. If you appeared before the pardon board, which I sit on, and I heard your case, I would probably grant you, but not after 20 years. You've only served 20 years, and you took the life of an individual unnecessarily. There's no reason, rhyme, or an explanation of why an individual in the prime of her life who decided that she didn't want to get married and broke off an engagement should lose her life. And as a 64-year-old man with good understanding, you understand exactly what I'm saying. Am I right?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. Also, I see speaking today in support there is Melanie Townsend. If you would unmute your mic and any statements you give it directly to the board.
Okay, this is Melanie. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, I can hear you well.
Okay. I've known Mr. Johnnie Johnson for most of my life, and I know that he has lived with regret and remorse for the past 20 years And if he could turn back time and make a different choice, I know that he would. None of us should be judged forever by our worst day and our worst choice. There's far more good in Johnny than the actions of that one day. He's expressed remorse and humbly served his time while following all the requirements, taking all opportunities offered to better himself. Johnny needs now the opportunity to write a better chapter in his life and be a productive member of society. And I know and believe that he is capable and ready to do that. I'm so confident that I am happy to have him help with my mom. And I know that Johnny wants to begin again.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Ms. Townsend. Also, I see in opposition today, we have speakers, Ms. Taylor Harrison. If you would unmute your mic and you can speak, anything you say it directly to the board.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Good morning. My name is Taylor Hairston. I'm the youngest son of Jamie Hairston. Johnny Johnson murdered my mom just 10 days after my 10th birthday. Thankfully, I wasn't there to experience the events like my brother was, but her death and the murder of her has left a lasting impact on my life. Not only did Johnny remove the possibility of any future that I had with my mother, or I would have had with my mother, he destroyed the memories that I had as well. Because of the trauma of her death, I don't really remember my mom and the 10 years I was able to spend with her. I have stories and pictures, from family members to try to help, but the real memories aren't there. The strongest memory that I really have related to my mom is arriving at our house the day that she was murdered. I remember driving down the street with my dad, passing an ambulance, seeing the police cars, and wondering what happened. I remember not being allowed to go in our house and not understanding why. I remember the look on my brother and grandmother's face, knowing something was wrong. I remember being told my mom was dead and trying to understand what that really meant as a 10-year-old. Not only did Johnny kill my mom, he removed me from a stable home that I had with my mother and brother, the only home I had known for years. It's not something a child should have to go through. In school, I was often known as a kid without the kid without a mom. You can believe it. I was teased and questioned by classmates over the years in elementary and middle school just because I didn't have a mom anymore. As I've grown older, I've had to relive and retell the story of her death countless times to friends, coworkers, others. It's something that comes up really anytime anybody gets to know me. Because of Johnny, she wasn't there for the big life events like birthdays, graduations, my wedding, birth of my child. Throughout life, I've had constant reminders that Johnny murdered my mother. So now we're here today to evaluate Johnny's time in prison. When he was sentenced, he was given 40 years without parole. It's what the court decided was just only 20 years ago, but now his release is being considered. When deciding this, I just ask you to please remember that he chose to murder my mother. He chose to take her away from us. And please remember how that affected us. My mother didn't choose to die, but Johnny did choose to kill her. She doesn't get a second chance at life, and I don't believe he should either. Nothing can bring our mother back. We were given justice when Johnny was sentenced for 40 years without parole. He should serve that time, and nothing he's done over the last 20 years should change that. Thank y'all.
Thank you very much, Taylor. At this time, Mr. Gene Murphy, if you would unmute your mic. Anything you say it directly to the board.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right. I'm gonna apologize in advance. That kind of shook me up a little bit. Honestly, everything my brother said, really, all I'm gonna really be able to do is just echo. Johnny took the most precious thing that we're all given, and that's life. He took that from her. He took her from us. I had small notes. She's been gone 20 years. That's 20 birthdays, 20 Christmases. I have an 8-year-old. I have a 4-year-old. She's missed both of their births. My daughter just started 8 years old last weekend. I'm in a wheelchair, and she's starting to show signs of my disability. And my father's had a stroke, so he's not cognitively there anymore. And I can't pick up the phone and call my mother, the way that Johnny can talk to his daughter. I can't call her to ask her medical questions about things that I went through as a child. These are just the small things. Obviously him threatening Sheriff Prater, other members of the community that were involved in our lives, this is just the scope of what this man is. This wasn't a one-off incident. This was calculated. We filed police reports that he was watched him sitting on the top of the road, the week or so before, in the middle of the night. These were planned. No amount of rehabilitation classes, anger management, that this man committed murder. If you have anger problems because you get into a bar fight or something like that, that's control. That's you learning control, but this is murder. It can't be undone. And as my brother said, that's kind of how I closed, was with my notes. 40 years, we're sitting at 20 now, and this act came into play. These are the things that all these demons that we had have come back now, that we've compartmentalized and things like that. But I do want to say, I think I'm kind of collecting myself here. But my trauma is the day that he came into my house. I'm 4'10" and I weigh about 115 pounds. He's about 6 foot, maybe 250. When he lifted my mother up in his arms to carry her out of my house, and she's screaming, "Save me, get the gun, call 911," and she's begging for her life. I'm sitting here fighting that grown man. Mind you, I'm in a wheelchair right now. I'm fighting that grown man that you see there on that screen. Obviously, I was going to lose that fight. I went and got my gun. I was on my way outside, but he had already driven off. When I found my mother in the backyard, her head was basically blown out. Her eyeballs were blown out. Her tongue was hanging out of her mouth. She was bleeding a pool of her own blood. I went to go see if there was any signs of life, and all I felt was her empty body drained of blood. That's the sleeping pill that I have every night. That's what I see. Those are the memories that I have of my mother. I have 18. My brother doesn't have memories of my mother, but I have 18 years of my mother. And that day is all I remember of my mother. That's what I fall asleep with every night, and that's what I wake up with. That's the trauma that I live with every day. Thank you, board, for your time. I would like to add, if Mr. Johnson is granted, obviously I'm opposing, but if he is, I would like stipulations placed. I don't know if now's the time to do those, make stipulations. We have civil judgments against him and things like that. So I don't know if this is the time for that, but.
Okay, thank you. Also, I see today Miss Leona Fitzgerald speaking today in opposition with the DA's office in Caddo, victims coordinator. If you would unmute your mic, ma'am.
Good morning to the board. Yes, I'm Leone, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Caddo Parish District Attorney's Office today. First of all, I'm not really sure how it benefits Mr. Johnson today, to skew what happened, but I'm looking at the report where Sheriff Prater talks about the phone call he got after the murder where Mr. Johnson, told him what he had just done. So, I think that the board is probably already thinking that Mr. Johnson is disingenuous in a lot of the comments that he made today and his recounting of what happened on the day of the murder. This was not an anger management thing. It wasn't something that he needs conflict resolution for. This was a murder. What my office contends still was a second-degree murder, the intentional killing of a human being when there's the specific intent to kill or inflict great bodily harm. Mr. Johnson could not stand being rejected. He had turned his whole life upside down. He'd gotten fired from his job over his inability to cope with Miss Hairston breaking up with him. He had basically been stalking her. He had been, as Jean mentioned, sitting on her street and watching her. He had seen that she had had a date with another man just before the murder. So that's why he went over to Miss Hairston's house that day. It wasn't about life jackets or storage buildings or whatever. And as Jean mentioned, Miss Hairston was a tiny, petite woman. There's no way she could have fought him off. Him picking her up and carrying her out of her home doesn't sound like foreplay for a consensual sex act. I'm not sure if the board is aware that there was duct tape found, a roll of it just outside the storage building and a piece of it torn off in a circular shape inside the storage building. We know that Miss Hairston was having her monthly cycle, so if she had a perfectly nice house, she doesn't seem like the type of woman that would want to go out into a storage building to have consensual sex with a man that she had broken up with and tried to get to leave her alone. My office is tired of hearing about her breast implants and how she was always wanting Mr. Johnson to pay for things, because that in no way justifies him murdering her. So we don't buy this whole, I went over there, we got into an argument and one thing led to another. That is not what this is. And it's a power and control thing. And he just, if she was not going to see another man, he couldn't have that. So that's why he did what he did. And I won't speak on the trauma to Taylor and Jean because I think they've done a very powerful job themselves of relaying that to the board. I mean, Jean didn't just lose his mother, he lost his caretaker. He needed his mother physically in more ways than the average 18-year-old needs their mother. And so we'd also just like to remind the board of the threats that Mr. Johnson made toward our Sheriff Prater. Sheriff Prater is still our sheriff. He would be an easy person to locate if someone wanted to locate him. I think that's important to remember. And so, we're really not asking that Mr. Johnson be held to a higher standard because he was a deputy. We're asking that he be held to the standard that any human being should be held who takes the life of another human being who was totally unprovoked and incapable of defending herself. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. At this time, Mr. Johnson, anything you want to say to the board before we vote?
No, sir.
Okay, at this time, Mr. Alvin Roche will be voting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Johnson, based on express opposition from the sentencing judge, the DA's office, and law enforcement in your jurisdiction, also opposition from the victim's two sons who are vehemently opposed to early release, and what I consider insufficient time served for the murder of an individual who had, there was no revocation, no reason why this individual was murdered that day. My decision this morning is to deny your request.
Okay, at this time, Ms. Bonnie Jackson.
All right, Mr. Johnson, for the same reasons as my colleague, the strong opposition from the entire legal community, the extent of the harm caused and the strong victim opposition. And I don't think you've taken any programs to really address the core issues. And so my vote today likewise would be to deny your request.
At this time, I'm gonna be voting to deny. Very strong victims opposition, law enforcement opposition. I want you to work on some more programs, Mr. Johnson. This was a terrible act. And, days here, you have been denied. Thank y'all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wise.
Man, this case was so painful to watch. And we'll unpack this by going over the court documents. But just to hear her two sons speak, one who was 10 and has no memories of her, and the other who is disabled and had to go through that trauma and has to go through the feeling of feeling completely unable to stop this monster from taking his mother, his caregiver, and then having to find her body in the way that he described that. That's my sleeping pill. That's what I see every night. And the more that I read these court document, the more angry I became. This guy is a monster through and through. And it's actually, I think, quite interesting. He took a bench trial, not a jury trial, and the judge found him guilty of the lesser charge of manslaughter versus first degree and got the maximum sentence of 40 years. And then you have Act 122, which was legislation passed, or lobbied, I should say, by the Parole Project, which allows people who have served more than 20 years and are above the age of 40 to get parole. It literally tore up prior deals and sentencing, and for cases like this, it's tragedy. There are certain cases where I think Act 122 is good, but they could have put verbiage in Act 122 where it would only apply to people who had not killed anyone. They could have done that. I saw somewhere there was writing there, and it was amended to include those who have committed these crimes, but I don't know who's responsible for amending it. But it was a bill that was passed by both sides by both parties, and the whole idea is to take aging people out of the prison system, and it's just moving $1 from one side of the DOC then to this other, another. It's just moving money from one pocket to another. But this guy was a monster. He was married. He left his wife because this was he went to a DV call as a police officer, and this woman was there. So he left his wife for this woman. And when she left him, he was accusing her of sleeping with the sheriff, of sleeping with basically everyone. And the guy's just nuts. And to think that he was a police officer for all these years, and the type of havoc that he wreaked on the people he was supposed to serve and protect is also terrifying. And then there's a woman that his plan is to go and move in with the woman. And you just say, what, how bat crazy do you have to be to date a man of this record and then hope that he gets out to go move in with him? It's just nuts. I mean, there are some people I just will never understand. You just can't make sense of it. So he was sentenced to 40 years, which is the maximum sentence, again on the bench trial, because he was convicted of manslaughter. For some reason, the judge thought that it was manslaughter. So let's go over the facts of the detail. Oh, on top of it too, how he really did, even now, he was trying to drag her through the mud. Every chance he got, he says, oh, she wanted me to pay for her breast implants, and she was talking to her second husband, and it was like everything he was trying to do was to even still to harm her. You know, and it's enough said when your own son doesn't talk to you and your daughter, who you claim you have a relationship, doesn't show up to your parole hearing. It's enough said. On September 29, 2001, officers were alerted via 911 call that Jamie Hairston had been kidnapped from her residence. The emergency call was placed by her teenage son. He informed the dispatcher that his mother was taken by Johnny, her former live-in boyfriend. Officers began looking for the suspect's truck. Before it was found, the officers reached the residence. The young man called back to say that his mother was in the backyard and that she was dead. When the officers arrived, they discovered that Hairston, also referred to in the record as Jamie, had been shot in the side of the head. In the meantime, Johnson, formerly a Caddo Parish sheriff deputy, called a fellow deputy and told him that he had just shot his former girlfriend. He also called his former wife's residence and told his daughter, who answered the telephone, that he had killed her. When his former wife came to the telephone, he gave her specific details about the events leading up to the killing. He agreed to meet the deputy at his parents' residence, where he was taken into custody without incident. He was subsequently charged with second degree and elected to have a bench trial after waiving his rights by a jury trial. Again, right, so he wasn't charged with first degree, he was charged with second degree and found guilty of manslaughter. I don't get how a judge would find him guilty of manslaughter. Hairston and Johnson had lived together for about 4 years before they broke up in late August of 2001. However, on September 9th, 2001, Johnson came to the house to finish moving the remainder of his property. As he and Hairston stood in the driveway, they began to argue. Eugene begged Johnson to leave and he threatened to call the sheriff. However, Johnson responded that if the sheriff showed up, he would put a bullet between his eyes. Apparently, that was not the first time that Johnson had made such threats concerning law enforcement or concerning other men whom he thought Hairston was involved. At trial, Eugene testified about the relationship between his mother and the defendant. He gave details of the day of the killing. He stated that on the day of the murder, his mother came in the door being followed by Johnson. Her hair was messed up and her face was red as she told him to get his gun and call 911. However, Johnson grabbed her and carried her back outside. As Eugene went to get his gun, he saw Johnson's truck leaving. Johnson testified on his own behalf. He explained that his relationship with the victim began when he was summoned to her residence on a TV call involving a prior live-in boyfriend. He admitted that he left his wife and became estranged from his parents to move in with the victim and pursue the relationship. So he just left everything to do this, idiot. However, Johnson blamed Hairston for ruining his marriage, finances, and career as all her fault, and he determined that he was not going to let her ruin him further. He asserted that he killed his former girlfriend because she initiated sex with him while they were in the shed in the backyard and then told him she was going to report that he... Right. I totally believe him. He's really credible, that's definitely what happened. He got fired, he went there, they were just, and then she just flipped on him and said that and he lost it. And a judge bought into that? Are you kidding me? Like, how did the judge not get him on second degree? Why would a judge give him manslaughter. It's bizarre. You see the strangest things when the more and more that you you look at court documents, you just see things that don't make sense. The DA showed. Thank goodness for the DA showing up to this. It's a breath of fresh air. Never seen this DA before, but nice to meet you. And she said it didn't sound very much like consensual. What did she list? Was it duct tape or rope? You just can't make it up. Still, the judge again thought it was manslaughter. Why? So they said that it was excessive. The remarks made by the judge indicate that he found no mitigating circumstances. He also noted that although he had ruled that the killing was manslaughter, it was a homicide that impacted not only the victim's life, but her family's as well. No, wow, Judge, you're so smart. How many programs did you take to realize that? The victim's family members read statements outlining the impact that her death had on them, particularly the victim's 2 sons and her invalid father. So yeah, they took a daughter from a father as well. A father had to bury her daughter. Of particular note is the fact that the trial judge stated that the defendant should have seen that situation would be blowing up miles before it got to this point. Yeah, okay. Great, Judge. You're brilliant. He also noted that the defendant had shown no remorse. The records show that he carried the victim out of her house as she begged him to stop. And after she had told her son to get the gun and call 911, once outside, he held her by the arm hard enough to cause severe bruising, and then he shot her in the side and then shot her in the head twice. That's manslaughter, Judge? That's manslaughter, Judge? Are you kidding me? That's manslaughter? How is that manslaughter? Someone needs to check this judge. How is that manslaughter? And his story today was he thought that the door opened. He had gotten the gun. He just lost it. More important, however, are the judge's remarks regarding why he was not going to give him a lighter sentence. He stated that more tragic results would occur. The judge was obviously referring to the behavior of the defendant weeks prior to the killing. Johnson had lived with the victim for over 4 years and had moved out of her residence about a month before this incident. Approximately 3 weeks before the killing, he had returned to the residence. After a heated argument, the victim had called 911. Several witnesses testified that he had made threats to kill his boss, the sheriff, because he thought the victim might be having a relationship with him. Yeah, exactly. Guy's nuts. He also thought she might be having a relationship with the man who owned the health club where the victim worked, and another male friend of the victim, probably the mailman and the milkman too. Not only did Johnson admit at the sentencing hearing that he had indeed threatened to kill some of the people, he also admitted that he had indicated he would not be taken into custody. Well, I lost my spot. Scenario had been plenty into custody, but would rather go by death by cop. Well, great. Testimony showed that he discussed this with another officer, and this behavior led to subsequent dismissal from the sheriff's office. So he actually was making these statements while wearing the uniform, and then they fired him. This scenario certainly gave plenty of evidence to support the judge's concern that his career as a law enforcement officer was truly a dangerous man who has no respect for human life. So then why manslaughter? During the sentencing hearing, and I guess it wouldn't have made a difference. He could have had a life sentence and still have Act 122. So I guess who cares, right? During the sentencing hearing, the defense counsel tried to show that other defendants had received light sentences in similar situations. Well, I'm glad that I scrolled more down on this page. Look at this. The judge believes his story. that the sex was consensual. Defendant, who is charged with second-degree, waived trial by jury at a bench trial, was found guilty of manslaughter. The trial court stated that it believed the defendant's story of consensual sex and that the victim's threat to falsely claim that it wasn't consensual. Specifically, the trial court concluded that it was the opinion that this shooting was a sudden thought to kill her, that he was provoked enough to cause his blood to boil in sudden passion, and the defendant does not appeal this verdict. Are you kidding me? The judge believed him. The judge believed this guy. Wow. I'm not really surprised, but there you go. That's why it was manslaughter. As an experienced law officer, defendant should have seen this coming. He met the victim on a call. She was upset because a former live-in boyfriend had not been arrested on a DV complaint. Thereafter, while living with George, she initiated contact with defendant, who was married, father of twins, and working 3 jobs. Defendant left his family and moved in with the victim. He's a real stand-up guy, you know? What she did with defendant, she did to him. In August, she met Scott Kelly and began a relationship with him. Defendant moved out in September. Once without debt, defendant is now broke and fired from his position as a deputy. The atmosphere is stressful and explosive. I don't know what they were saying. Was she just going with a bunch of different men? Is that what the judge was saying? It is an old story repeated too often. What's an old story repeated too often? That he would grab her, pull out a gun, and shoot her twice? At sentencing, the trial court said 1 shot to the body and 1 shot to the head. That's more mafia training than law enforcement training. That is also murder. That is also murder rather than manslaughter. So how can a judge say that and then give manslaughter? It doesn't. It's like, what are we reading? It is a maximum sentence for manslaughter to which defendant objects. It is difficult to resolve the verdict and sentencing statements of the trial. It is unnecessary. Death has occurred, which defendant's version could have been murder. Yes, I think anyone with common sense would have said that it was. I will not look beyond the trial's court discretion to sentencing with statutory range. And he appealed. He appealed his judge taking it easy on him because the judge believed that she made it up. Wow. I don't know what gave this guy any credibility that the judge would take his word for it. It's hard to understand that. But there you have it. That's how he got the manslaughter charge. And he's scary. He is very scary. And I'm glad that they denied him. And for the children's sake and everyone else's sake, I really hope that they continue to do so. But with that, I'll let you go.